fun back to the time, come on. The fun back to the time, come on. The fun back to the time, come on. The fun back to the time, come on.
So for a long time, I only listened to electronic music that sounded like this. Or this. Or this. Or this. But when I started listening to Daft Punk, electronic music could sound like this. And while it took me a fair bit to get used to those iconic robot vocals, songs like Around the World in particular made me love Daft Punk. I then dove into their discography and loved all of it. I might have only been a fan for a little over a year, but these two robots crafted what would become some of my favorite music ever. But, as we all know, Daft Punk unfortunately split up not too long ago. I probably would have been even more upset if I'd been a fan for longer, but it was still a bummer. But seeing how everyone has been paying tribute to the duo inspired me to do the same. So today, I'll be taking a look at the record that stood above the rest in their catalog, that being 2001's Discovery. But first, a little history. Daft Punk themselves formed in 1993, but didn't release a record until 1997, and that record was Homework. This album stood very tall above basically all other French or Chicago house music at the time. It also left a huge impact on people and has since become a classic. The Homework was propelled by some fantastic singles including Revolution 909, Da Funk, and the incredibly infectious Around the World. These singles dominated the Billboard dance charts and really got people to pay attention to Daft Punk. Their ability to create these irresistible grooves and incorporate samples was nothing to scoff at. Homework is chock full of house bangers that would light any club on fire. And while there are plenty of awesome deep cuts to be found on here, I feel like Homework singles really make the album. Seriously, they're that good. Around the World has to be one of the best electronic dance songs I've ever heard in my life. After Homework's release, the duo spent most of 1997 on the Definite Direct tour, where they ended up recording Alive 1997, while also working on the Daft video collection. Now, when Daft Punk started working on a follow-up, they wanted to steer away from Homework's sound, since other artists started copying them. Which brings us to the one and only Discovery.
One more time.
This album not only marked a new era for Daft Punk's sound, but also their entire persona. These guys aren't just dudes in cheap masks anymore. Oh no, they're robots now. This visual became integral to Daft Punk and has since become seriously iconic. You can't not think of Daft Punk without thinking of the robot helmets. You just can't. Not only that, but they rarely do interviews and hardly speak. And that stuff just further sells the idea. Like, yeah, Daft Punk is just two musicians in costumes, but like, that's not fun. Daft Punk are robots, for God's sake. There's even some backstory for it. See, one day, their equipment blew up, leaving them malformed, so they had to become the robots we all know and love. It just creates this really cool ambiguity that makes the duo such a cool and unique act in music. And if we're being honest, it'll never be replicated. These two robots created something iconic that made them stand out. Plus they, had the music to back it up. On November 13th, 2000, Discovery's lead single, One More Time, was released and it was a massive hit. The song landed at number 1 in France, number 2 in the UK, and number 61 in the US. And it's not hard to see why at all. The sticky melody, the driving house beats, the insanely catchy hook, it was bound to make a splash. And all the other singles did well. some better than others of course, but tracks like Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger and Something About Us became insanely iconic. In fact, the former of the two ended up being generously sampled by the one and only Kanye West in his 2007 hit Stronger. But I digress. On February 26, 2001, this world was blessed with the full album. But critics were actually a tad mixed on it. It wasn't overly hated by publications or anything, but still. The Guardian gave this thing 2 stars for some godforsaken reason. The Village Voice tossed it a C+, and good old Pitchfork infamously gave it a 6.4 out of 10. I don't know, I guess the repetitive nature of the music may not have sat well with some critics at the time. But hey, the record sold incredibly well, it charted very high, and is certified platinum in France. Besides, these days the album is looked at very fondly in retrospect and has been praised excessively. You simply cannot deny the fact that Discovery is a classic. When crafting this record, Daft Punk didn't completely overhaul their sound or anything, but there were some major adjustments. Homework was definitely a record meant for the club more than anything, what with all its longer songs that are based on looping dance grooves. And while you could definitely get away with blasting songs off Discovery at a club, there's a lot more pop sensibilities at play this time around. Daft Punk wanted to dive into different song structures and such. On Discovery, Daft Punk pull from many different styles of music. Here you'll find traces of disco, house, funk, R&B, electro, and most importantly, pop. The songs on Discovery are very direct, with plenty of infectious melodies and catchy pop hooks aplenty. Even if a song has no vocals, the melody will stick in your mind like glue. I feel like the shift in sound helped give the duo more crossover appeal. There's no denying singles like One More Time would go over really well on pop radio. But most of all, Daft Punk took the sounds that influenced them in the first place and turned them into a sleek, catchy, and dramatic masterpiece that still sounds futuristic to this very day. The whole record opens with the explosive One More Time, and what an opener this is. It perfectly shows off Daft Punk's new sound with its glistening instrumental and heavily auto-tuned vocals provided by the American singer Romanthony. And this man brings on a hook that is out of this world. It's super infectious. But there's one part of this song that sticks out, and that's the very long, subdued, yet very emotional bridge that eventually builds up into the original beat, and it's pure bliss. And that bridge immediately shows how Daft Punk is willing to toy with more fleshed out song structures, and they succeeded in spades. We then get the incredibly groovy instrumental track Aerodynamic, which also shows off a strong sense of melody. Not only do you get an incredible groove here, but also an old school hard rock-esque guitar riff that pops in later. Then it all transitions into this synth passage that carries the song out. After that jam, Daft Punk hits you with what I consider to be one of the best songs they've ever made, Digital Love. Here the duo shows that they're not just robots. No, they're robots with feelings. But in all seriousness, this song is one of the best pieces of sound I've ever heard. The passionate vocoder vocals, the cheesy lyrics, the heavenly disco sample, and a simply stunning payoff just make it one of the most dramatic and lively songs in the duo's catalog. It's a masterpiece of a song. But then we get yet another one of Daft Punk's best songs, and I think most of you know what it is.
Faster, stronger.
This is an insanely fun song that never, ever gets old. At least to me. I mean, just listen to that sample. You can't go wrong. It's also a prime example of the duo working with a very simple, yet very effective vocal hook. It worked on Around the World, and it sure as hell works here. I also want to point out how good the vocal manipulation is. The duo somehow made vocals with this much auto-tune and this much vocoding sound really awesome. I mean, there are some very rigid pitch shifts going on, but it sounds perfect, and surprisingly has a lot of personality. And this goes for any song by the duo, really. But yeah, this song is iconic for a reason. What more can I really say? From this point on, the Daft Punk really pulls out all the stops. The super punchy kicks and snares on crescendos are wonderful, along with that vocal sample. Night Vision is a cool 1 minute long lounge-inspired piece that fits in surprisingly well. But then the next couple of tracks show off how well Daft Punk are able to weave in short but sweet vocal snippets into a song. Superheroes has to be one of my favorites on the album, honestly. The snare roll at the beginning makes it instantly recognizable, but the very dense, thumping beat and vocal chops just elevate the track to new heights. High Life is yet another great moment on the record that features some fantastical vocal chops laid over a very bright and shiny instrumental that lives up to the song's title. The groove is yet again very straightforward but irresistible all the same. But then we get a song that shows off a side of Daft Punk that nobody had ever seen at that point, that being the iconic single, Something About Us. This song is smooth, slow, groovy, and dare I say, sensual. Yeah, this is a full-on lovey-dovey slow jam, and you know what? It's amazing. The song is pretty laid back, but it delivers a memorable, slick groove that'll still have your head bobbing despite the lack of booming house beats. This track is a perfect example of a slower song going over really well in an otherwise high-energy album. There are so many albums out there that'll feature these slow burners that just don't go over well, and it always drives me nuts. But Daft Punk completely avoids this issue by still delivering a great catchy song that has purpose. Sure, the song is pretty cheesy, but I think that's the point. Discovery was partially meant to be an ode to youth, and I think this song fits that theme. Plus, the romantic vocoder vocals make this song very special. It sounds like Robot Prom Night. The next 3 tracks are all instrumental, the first of which being Voyager, and this song is absolutely amazing. Seriously, that bass line is something to behold. It's silky smooth and has so much texture. Definitely a major highlight on the album in my opinion. Veritas Quo follows after, and it's admittedly my least favorite song on here, but it's still really dang good. It isn't too lively, but the synthesizers create a really good atmosphere that I can't deny. But then a Short Circuit quickly picks the pace back up with something that sounds more reminiscent of Homework. After all, they would play a rough version of this during their sets back in that era. The tighter drum beats and wacky yet funky synth line make the track stick out, while not sounding too out of place or anything. There's even this breakdown in the middle of the song that ends up turning into this staticky, distorted bit that makes it sound like the song is melting before my ears, but in the best way possible. We then head back into a vocal track with the awe-inspiring Face to Face. It's beloved for a reason, because holy crap, the groove here is insane, and Todd Edwards' singing is just fantastic. So much swagger, so much charisma, so much personality. I love it. Plus those old school synth pop drum beats that show up during the verses are lovely. And the sample work here is crazy. The sampling on all the other songs is amazing too, but Face to Face is on another level. Daft Punk grabbed so many tiny little bits and pieces from various songs and made it into their own. It's insane. Face to Face is such a captivating and a likable song that stands tall in their discography. We then reach the closer of this masterpiece, Too Long. Now, I would completely understand why someone would think this song is a little, too long, but I personally think this is a fantastic closer. Once you get to that payoff, this song feels larger than life. And I actually love the way the song builds up. Romanthony sounds super passionate here, and the way Daft Punk slowly introduces layers to the track is beautiful. It culminates everything great about the album to me, especially the more dramatic side of Discovery. It's an amazing way to end the album. Now, I would be done here, but there's one more thing I'm obligated to mention, that being the album's accompanying film, Interstellar 5555. I actually didn't watch this thing until I started writing this, but holy crap, it's awesome. The movie follows these alien musicians that get kidnapped and are turned into humans. They are then exploited by a label, so the band has to get out of their control. It's a very endearing film with some stellar artwork from Mr. Matsumoto. I always love when a film or show can communicate a captivating story with no dialogue, and this is a prime example of that. And the fact there is an anime that accompanies an album like this is just awesome. The film also lines up with the music unbelievably well, giving songs like Digital Love, Something About Us, and Veritas Quo even more weight. I heavily suggest watching the film if you can find it. So yeah, I freaking love Discovery. I think it's the Daft Punk's best effort. I think it's the best electronic album ever made, and it's just one of my favorite albums of all time. The grooves, the hooks, the robotic vocals, the variety, the dramatic feel, the out-of-this-world sample work, it all melts into this perfect experience front to back. It really cemented Daft Punk as one of the most creative acts in music. And I know people love to say that 2013's Random Access Memories is like a celebration of music itself, and while that album certainly is, I personally think Discovery is an homage to the feeling of just loving music, if that makes sense. The passion I get from this album is unreal. It feels so meticulously crafted, yet so organic at the same time. The way the duo took these previously uncool genres like disco as well as arena rock and molded them into this futuristic sound is just stunning. The Discovery also left a real big mark on music. Like I said earlier, the album is a damn classic, but many other dance producers were inspired by the duo and ended up finding success. Justice, for example, made some great music later in the 2000s. And Daft Punk themselves continued to have a great career going forward. Human, after all, while a bit rough in places, is still a really good album in my opinion. Then they released Random Access Memories in 2013, which I mentioned earlier. A lot of people consider this better than Discovery, in fact. And while I love it a ton, especially the production side of things, I find some of it hard to go back to sometimes. It can be a lot more demanding, but they work much better when listening to the record as a whole. But like, is any of it really as good as Digital Love? I don't think so. But hey, it's still like their second best, and it deserved that Grammy. Although Ram would end up being their swan song, the duo actually helped produce a few songs on Kanye West's Yeezus that same year. And later on, Daft Punk would end up producing a couple tracks with The Weeknd on his album Starboy. And yeah, they're great songs, definitely some of my favorites from The Weeknd. Daft Punk is an act that is sort of a once-in-a-lifetime thing, I feel. There will never be another electronic music act that is as cool, cutting edge, or as purely talented as this robotic duo. I think they deserve every ounce of praise they get, and even though I haven't been a fan very long, I can't deny their genius, especially when it comes to Discovery. And even though they've retired, their music will live on and continue to be loved by many. And as long as that's the case, we can continue to celebrate their legacy one more time.
Been a long time since we brought the noise. Thought we'd drop some beats and the summer with a bang. Finally, Friday, August 31st at midnight, we're breaking off a full hour of animated music videos in a Midnight Run special edition. We got the first 3 Daft Punk videos and the world premiere of 4.
Harder, better, faster, stronger.
Plus all 3 Gorillaz videos, including Clint Eastwood, and Toonami videos you've never seen before. Ain't nothing changed.